Welcome to the Powering Unique You podcast. Here, we create encouraging conversations to help you accelerate your career, expand your unique potential, and become a better leader.
Hello, привет, 안녕하세요, hola, wherever you are, my friend, I send you greetings. I am so happy to be here with you, and I'm excited. We have this platform to have conversations, to have interactions, to have encouragement. I hope you started this day and this week on a positive note, on the right 2 feet, and ready to conquer, ready to win this day and this week. And my name is Jana Masik, and I'm here to just encourage you, just to give you some push. We all sometimes need a little bit of more positivity from someone else, perhaps, and to give us a little bit of push to know and to believe in yourself and know that you, my friend, can achieve your dreams and you can become the person you can be. So today, I am really thrilled. As you're coming in, please tell me where you're coming from. Tell me, how are you doing? I'm happy you're joining. If you're Team Live, if you're here live with me and my guest today, I am rooting for you. If you're here on the replay and watching us at your leisure, maybe later in the day or on the weekend, I'm rooting for you, my friend. So today I feel it's a good and important conversation. It's about stories. Let's talk about stories. And what does it mean to have stories, and how, as leaders, and all of us, each one of us, you, my friend, is a leader. Doesn't matter what position you hold, you're as a leader. And how charismatic leaders, check this out, charismatic leaders, how can we create our own very unique stories about who we are so we can actually move people and mountains, and we can influence this world. We can change people's lives. We can change this world for better. So this is a conversation today that I feel is really important, really valuable. And I'm really excited to bring on the guest today. He's going to share his framework and a wealth of knowledge and expertise on this topic. He is a founder of sales and marketing firms, StrategyPeak Sales and Marketing Advisors. He has 27 years of sales and marketing. He's an industry veteran in the industry. And also he's an author of the Amazon bestseller book that is called The 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell. That's a good one to check out, my friend. So that book is really details how anyone, you, me, right? Anyone can move people and mountains with the power of story. And without further ado, I want to bring on my guest, Kurian Mathew Tharakan. Here you go. Kurian, I'm so happy to be here with you today. How are you doing, my friend?
Really well. Jana, thanks for having me on your show.
That is fantastic. And please maybe give us a little bit of background. Why stories? Why stories that are so powerful that you feel and believe that can move people in mountains, and when we craft them correctly?
We're all human beings. The vast majority of who's listening to your show right now are humans, and the only way human beings can relate to each other, let alone understand each other and the world around them, is through the stories they tell themselves. So they tell themselves certain stories, and they tell their listeners stories. And between those two things, you have a pretty good understanding of the identity of the speaker. And that's what you're really trying to communicate, the identity of who you are, where you are today, where you're going, and how we will get there. So ultimately, we are all in the business of creating little mini strategic narratives for ourselves and our communities.
Wow, this is powerful. I love it. I love that you mentioned the stories we tell ourselves. Sometimes the stories that we tell others are different from the stories we tell ourselves. We put on that mask. We're so pumped. We're so great on the outside, but the stories we tell ourselves are really miserable. And the disconnect happens. And then people sense, there's maybe the stories you tell other people are not as powerful, not as authentic. So I think that connection of believing in your story, knowing that your story is valuable, and also being able to accept, that story and then communicate that powerfully can be amazing. So Kurian, please tell us, you have a framework for telling stories. We know the stories are powerful. I know that when you listen to the leader, and I can give a little bit of example, the previous company I worked with had a very charismatic leader, and he had the story. He came from Ireland with the $10 in his pocket, and he followed musical band, one of them, Michael Jackson, and then through his experience, he built a fortune for himself, an amazing energy company. So that story was just, and his charisma really captured, I think, anybody that worked with him or for him or did business with him. So Kurian, please tell us a little bit about the framework, and maybe we take time to unpack those 7 pieces that are very important, I believe, for us to learn from you.
Yeah, and Jana, what you've just said there is brilliant, because you know the story he wanted you to remember.
Yeah.
And that's a critical part of this, is that it's not only enough to understand your stories, and such. You have to communicate your stories. And the communication of those stories have to be done in a memorable way so that they're retained and, most importantly, acted upon. I'm presuming you no longer work for this individual, but you still remember the story. And it sounds like you have fond memories of the company and such, right?
Yes,
but
absolutely.
The story gave you purpose, and it still gives you intent after all these years. And that's the most amazing part of it. The stories that I have in the book, and the book's title is called The 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell. Now, not everybody can be charismatic in the same way that a Steve Jobs can be charismatic, for example, right? But you can definitely be more charismatic.
Yes.
And that's the thing. And when I say charismatic, there's many different, definitions and nuances to that. But ultimately, I want you to focus on one thing: the ability of your story and your presence to make your audience and your people come alive. Come alive with purpose and vision and mission and intent. And that is how you unleash their power for the direction of your own strategic narrative, and to show them how their strategic narratives, they may not call it that. They may just call it, well, I have this desire to do such, but that's the genesis. That's the beginnings of a strategic narrative for themselves. And to show them how their strategic narratives can fit within your strategic narrative. And together you will achieve outcomes for you and them, and together we'll create a better world.
I love this.
And a better world can, it doesn't have to be, on a global basis. It can be your community.
Yes.
It can be your family.
That is so
anybody
true.
who's gotten married, has sold a story to their mate.
That is so true. That is so true. I could tell you that it is reflecting on it. Sometimes you think, oh, only the owners of the founders, the CEOs they are the ones that are charismatic. They're the ones that need to craft their stories. And, maybe you are here listening and say, who am I here? Maybe I'm a mom and I'm just in a, entry position role, or maybe I'm a manager, maybe I'm in a director role, and what is the sense for me to listen to and craft my stories? Well, I agree with you, Kurian, because it's in family, in relationships, it's wherever we are, we constantly tell stories. So we constantly communicate with stories. I love to pick your brain on how to maybe select the right stories to tell to ourselves and to others, and then frame them. What are the most 7 important of those that we need to even practice telling to ourselves and to others?
So the book is actually divided into 2 sections. And the very first section is all about culture. It's not even about storytelling, because unless you have the ability to retain the story, and stories are like life-giving water, life-giving rainfall. And if it falls on dry, parched earth, that has no ability to retain that water because there's a tarp covering it, it'll just bounce off. So culture is the soil in which you infuse the life-giving rain of the 7 stories with. So the culture parts are all about, how we do things around here. There's 7 primary pillars of culture that go from everything from, the value that we create to the social structures that we have in our organizations or our communities, the way we do create decisions, that we determine decisions to be made, right? How do we govern, for example? Our religion, what are the values that we worship?
Yes.
Hopefully it's not the boss as God, but but the values that we worship, right? Different types of customs and tradition to enforce the framework of that culture. Things like language and writing. What are the words that we use? We have a factory here in Edmonton. I'm here way up here in Canada, and just outside of our city, we have a international dog food manufacturing plant. They ship all over the world. They deliberately call their production facilities kitchens. It's not a factory. And I've been doing consulting work with them, and they have corrected me on more than one occasion because I default to factory. No, it's a kitchen. And kitchens are where food is made. They make human grade food for these dogs. And it's a company called Champion Pet Food. Very deliberate about the culture. Now you take that culture and then you infuse it with the life-giving reign of the 7 stories. And the 7 stories, where I took inspiration from, was how great religions infuse their people with drive and purpose and passion and the ability to bring new adherents into the tent of belief. And the 7 stories, in fact, and this goes way back, well before me, in the early 70s, Steve Jobs of Apple fame had one of his early marketing consultants was a fellow by the name of Regis McKenna. And Regis said that great marketing takes its cues from great religion. So great religion, in order for it to thrive, and there's been thousands of religions throughout history, but the big ones right now are Christianity at about 2.1, 2.2 billion, Islam about 1.8 billion. And then it drops like a rock after that. It just drops like a rock. Judaism is only about 14 million adherents worldwide right now. Only 14 million. But if you take a look at those 3 religions, they're Abrahamic. They have Abraham as a central figure, in addition to God and perhaps Jesus Christ as prophet or son of God, right? But what all of these religions, the ones that dominate today have, is their ability to propagate believable stories. And the stories come alive in their adherents' minds. And one of the key aspects of these religions is that you tell other people about it. It's proselytization. So you bring other people into the tent with you. One of the key aspects of Christianity. 2,000 years ago, Christians were just another band of little nuts. They were zealots. That's what they were. And, the Romans tried to exterminate them. That's what they were trying to do. But, just a band of nuts held their ground and became these enormous forest of oak trees. Little nut, right? Big forest of oak trees. By proselytizing and adhering to the belief structures in their religion. Well, we want to do the same when we do our own creation of our stories. And the reason that these belief structures, these stories are so powerful is that they address primal questions in people's head. And when you address primal questions, you give them the direction that you want them to go. And if you don't give them the answers to the primal questions, they will make up their own answers. And they may not be the answers you want them to have. So you have to be deliberate in how they do it. If a leader is not communicating these stories, I guarantee their people are making these stories up for themselves because their minds cannot exist in a story vacuum. I'll give you the 7 stories. The very first one is creation and origin. How did this start? What was the inciting incident? Story 2 is all about our identity, values, and beliefs. What are the beliefs and values we aspire to? What must we never violate? What must we always put into place and make sure that they're adhered to?
And I want to pause just for a second to reflect on what you say, because I believe there's important, as I'm listening to you, there is important word that stands out in my mind. It says clarity. And the reason why I'm sharing that is because I have been personally on this journey where I felt I needed to share my story. And that's the reason, one of the biggest reasons why this podcast is live right now, that I need to share my lessons. I need to share my reasons and my experiences and help other people feel encouraged. I feel my superpower is encouragement. Now, the clarity about your stories and the clarity of what you just mentioned first, to the origin and then the belief system, is so important, because when you try to please everyone and operate on, I need to tell my story because I want everybody to like me, it's just not going to work. So I feel that narrowing down on what truly matters to you as a leader, as you're listening today, and gaining the clarity for what drives you, what is your origin, what are your beliefs, right? And then crafting that story around that is going to be very important. So I want to hear some more on that.
Not only is the story have to be believable, it has to actually create polarity.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, every great story has to have its unbelievers as well, the pagans.
Yeah.
Right. Not only do you have the true believers, but you also have to have the pagans, people.
Someone that's not gonna accept it, right?
Someone's not going to accept
I don't like that. Yeah.
That's how you have a highly refined story. If everybody's buying into it, it's probably a diluted value proposition, diluted story plot, those kind of things. And they're buying into it like this. They're not buying into it with a full dive into that story.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Story 3 is, and by the way, please jump in here. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking.
No, I love this. And maybe as you go through them, maybe you unpack a little bit on how to structure them.
Sure.
That's
why don't we circle back to that? Let me outline the 7 stories first, and then we'll
go back and then we'll circle back and we kind of unwrap them a little bit, so to speak.
Story 3 is the big idea. And the big idea is the central organizing concept that everything else revolves around. FedEx's big idea is absolutely positively overnight. That is FedEx's idea. If you go to Apple's big idea is not iPod, iPad, Mac, whatever it is. Their big idea is design. Okay, and design is not only in how it looks, but how it works. And that's straight from Steve Jobs himself. Story 4 is all about the enemy we face. So it's not only, what we fight for, but what we fight against. Fight against, fight for. So we can fight against childhood poverty, or we can fight for adult literacy.
Yes.
So we need some kind of a polarizing figure or concept that allows us to marshal resources and energies towards, to solve it in some way. And it doesn't have to be an individual. It can be a concept like literacy. It can be a hurricane. And you're in Florida. You're no stranger to hurricanes down in Florida.
Yes.
But when a hurricane is threatening to arrive to landfall, you are all marshaled in the same direction. Miami and Jacksonville, all these places, they're going in the same direction, trying to get people to safety. Story 5, speaking of hurricanes, is all about the mighty winds. And the mighty winds are these big macro trends that affect all of us, our competitors, our customers, ourselves. And they don't care who they benefit and who they leave in their wake. And what I say, it's tidal waves of opportunities and tsunamis of destruction in their wake. And if you take a look at a variety of things, for example, the most simple one is the advent of the transistor in the 1940s. And from the transistor, that they took over from the vacuum tube. Transistor went into the very first, crude microprocessors, integrated circuits. And then we entered the microprocessors. And then we had the advent of the internet, which allows people like Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs and all sorts of people that have made their fortunes, eBay, on the backs of a transistor that was invented in the 1940s, because without it, the World Wide Web would not have taken place. So that is a big macro trend. Now, who did it create? Tidal waves of opportunity for the Jeff Bezos of the world, but it also created tsunamis of destruction. And who they destroyed in their wake were, the variety of things. The IBM Selectric typewriter was the de facto standard in the 1970s, 1980s. No one has an IBM Selectric typewriter anymore unless you are the owner of a museum.
Yeah.
But fortunately, IBM does have some other tricks up its sleeve, and they've gone on to other things. They've gone on to take advantage of the cloud and the World Wide Web and all these kinds of things. So we have to be on the right side of these mighty wins. And there's 6 basic mighty wins, societal wins, technological, environmental wins, economic wins, political wins, and legislative wins. And if you were on the wrong side of the political wins of the 1917 revolution in Russia, you would have been perhaps, with the Tsar and his family in the river. That's entirely
yes. And talking about that, I think, there's a definition then and I feel because we're in such a political polarized times right now, perhaps it's for some, it's a honor to be on the wrong side and die in honor, right? So it's a choice. I think that we all have to make, and to your point, you have to choose the wind. And sometimes, you gotta follow. To me, how I look at it, you gotta follow your almost like conscious, your intuition. You can't just stand like in some certain things that are windy right now in the society. I can't stand with that because it's against my core belief, against who I am. Sure. But I can't stand to say I am on this side. Although that wind is blowing so much, I can still stand firmly in my belief. And I feel that is powerful because then the people you're attracting with your story and what you stand for, the people that you're meant to attract by your story.
Right. Absolutely. And what you're talking about is psychographic trends, for example. And, Fox News attracts a whole different demographic than CNN.
Yeah.
And they both make money.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. Right. But, but if we take a look at, other wins, we can take a look at demographic wins. And after World War II, in 1946, 1947, the baby boom started. And along with the baby boom was the car boom, and then which allowed suburbanization, which allowed for the necessity for interstate highway system, which allowed McDonald's to take off.
And how do you, so what you're saying, Kurian, is really broad. What I would love to gather or capture from you is really more tactical strategies. Let's say for me, how do I use what you've painted for us so beautifully, and how do I use that power to create my story? Let's say, Jonna, take me an example.
I'll give you an example. Jonna, you're an HR consultant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're an HR consultant. So in the HR consulting business, one of the issues that we're having right now is the great quitting or the great resignations, and attracting talent and such. And from that perspective, that is a demographic, psychographic shift that has taken place.
I agree with you. And I give you a little bit more background because I'm not a typical HR consultant. I'm a global HR talent. So when you look at the global scale and how people were moving around, it really got disrupted in the past, year, 2 years. So
2 years.
Speak. Yes.
Absolutely. Right. So what happens now is that with your practice, one of the wins that you'll take a look at here is the demographic wins and the psychographic wins. If you were to put out a position paper about how people can attract the best talent at reasonable labor costs, reasonable prices, right? Without having to go through all the hell that, current recruitment processes are going through, because you will give them insight into how the millennial thinks, how the baby boomer thinks, how the, Generation X thinks. And it's different. And what this means for you, employer, is that you have to become an employer of choice, which means you have to brand at a level beyond the job and the salary and the hours of work. You have to brand on the aspects of things like values. What are the values that we as a company, as your future employer, aspire to, and how can your values integrate with that? Because one of the clearest things I'm seeing in this new generation of talent is that they very much want to be part of a mission-driven organization.
Yes.
And the idea of just working for a paycheck, that was their grandfathers. That was their grandfather's way of doing things. And this new generation wants a lot more. So this idea of understanding the mighty wind that is in play right now, demographics, psychographics, if you don't, you're going to be scrambling for talent for the next several years. You may never recover.
That makes absolute sense. I agree with you. I think it's what you're saying, that specific, point is to picking up on what is going on around and really tailoring your story, being curious and observant to tailoring what you're saying to yourself and to yours if you're in a business, to be able to capture what's happening around you.
Yeah. And not only what's happening right now, because if you're only witnessing what's happening right now, Jonna, you are probably already in the middle of that hurricane. What you want to do is to see what hurricanes are spawning offshore. What are the winds spawning offshore, and whether they're going to be a Category 5 or they're just going to be a little tropical wind. And that's the kind of thing you want to do. So if you take a look if you take a look back in the example of the transistor, or what is it, life sciences of various kinds, what that implies is that as these advances take place, the need for, and back to your industry again, the need for talent with advanced degrees is just going to boom. It's going to quintuple, quadruple, triple. It's going to do all these things. And you're going to see more and more people needing to do that. My nephew is right now, my sister and her family lives in the US, and he's taking a degree in cybersecurity.
Yep.
Cybersecurity. There was no such thing 15 years ago. But there's clearly a thing now. And I think you and I can agree that cybersecurity threats are not going away.
Not going away. It's going to be more and more.
Yep. I was reading a story about a Samsung fridge that was sending out, thousands of spam emails. This is a fridge. It's not even a computer. And they had to, so this idea of, creating software and protocols and policies, to counter cybersecurity, cyber threats is going to be a big deal to continue.
Yes, I agree with you. All right. So what's the next one?
Okay. The next one, we got to mighty winds. Now, all those stories, those first 5 stories are the left side of the equation. And if those stories are believable, there's a little equal sign, and then it's story 6. And story 6 is the journey we must undertake. So if all of this is true, and if you believe it, the equal sign, it's obvious. That's the journey we must undertake. And so now you can say that this is the kind of resources we will need. This is the direction we will plot. This is the kind of things that we will need from our people in the way of values and skills in order to enable that journey. I think it was in 1968, 69, something like that, long time ago, Intel, which is, a $250 billion company today.
Yes.
They made the decision. The CEO at the time, Andy Groves, led his team through the circular doors, the revolving doors at the front of the building. And he marched them outside and then came in the other way. And that was the symbolic act to say that we are no longer in the RAM business, the random access memory business, which was one of their big mainstays at the time, 68, 69, something like that. And the re-entry into the building was their entry into the microprocessor business. And so, it's all the different microprocessors, right up to what they're doing right now, x86, Pentiums, various kinds, nanometer type of, infrastructure to produce it, all these kinds of things, right? Was a understanding and a clear journey that was initiated back then. And they would not have been a $250 billion firm without that story being installed in all their people's heads. So
That
we
makes
want to be
sense.
able to say that, with all of this, these other previous 5 stories, this is the journey we must undertake. And if people have to willingly give you their hearts, minds, and souls.
Yes.
You can rent their bodies to sit at a computer screen, in their chair, but their real innovation, their real talent only comes through inspiration.
Yes.
And the only way you can inspire them is by telling compelling stories that they can participate in. Finally, story 7. Story 7 is now, those are all standalone stories. Now, story 7 is what we call a meta narrative. And a meta narrative combines the previous 6 stories into a single telling. So it's a summary of everything, but with the addition of keystone elements. And keystone elements are things that guarantee the win. The
Mm-hmm.
win. Guarantee the win. W-I-N.
Yes.
And and you can relate to a lot of different keystones you've heard of throughout history. God is on our side. Better people, better strategy, superior technology. It could be a lot
Mm-hmm.
of different things like that, right? During the reign of Alexander the Great, near the end of his final push east into India, he had to cross the mountains, and his people were really, really tired by this time.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to tell the story at that point in time as these were the mountains of the gods that they had heard of in Greek mythology. This
Mm-hmm.
is where the gods resided. And that's what gave them the extra oomph to get past those mountains and into India itself. And India was where his last campaigns were before he circled back around.
Yes.
So you have to be able to tell stories that allow people to see themselves. And also, wow, we have this extra edge as well.
Mm-hmm. This is really, really insightful, Kurian. I'm really curious about your own story. Have you crafted your own story using this framework? And maybe if you don't mind sharing it with us.
Sure. Well, the story, and it's not that you would have. I've done this for clients left and right? And the stories, I haven't written these stories down for myself, except in my book.
Yes.
In the book itself, right?
And where can we get the book if somebody's interested to check it out?
If you go to Amazon.com, any of the Amazons, you can get it
Yes.
on Amazon Japan, actually, and you can download a copy there. It's only $3.49.
That's
I wanted
awesome.
to price it
So check it out.
for the Kindle version, and I wanted to price it so that everybody could have access.
That's
to it, right?
awesome. That's
But
awesome.
if you come to StrategyPeak.com, Jana, you will get a little infographic. You can download that right now, and it'll give you the 7 stories in infographic form.
That's
right?
great.
So the stories that I have, I'm in my mid 50s right now, late 50s, and the story that I currently have is that I've got at most 30 good years left.
That's a
So
good
what am I going to do?
story.
What am I going to do with myself in the next 30 years? And one of the clearest things that's happened is in the first 30 years of my life, perhaps money and career achievement and things like that were very high on my list
Yes.
to continually attain, build, etc. For myself. And today, the story goes, I'm going to take my knowledge, especially when it comes to things like the 7 stories, the frameworks that we have, my experience in marketing over the last 27, 30 years. And I'm going to say, I'm going to help that next generation of entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take a look at the things that I've been doing in the last 5 years, 10 years, it's very much working with a generation of entrepreneurs that are 30 years younger than me, 25 years younger than me. And, I will perhaps invest in them, at least in time, if not money. There's a variety of things that I will do. But my next chapter, the next 30 years, will be about building a generation of new entrepreneurs one way or the other. And we need to have that kind of ability in the 7 stories here. It's all about, they struggle. Most new entrepreneurs don't know what they're getting themselves into.
Yes.
And they struggle with that. And what they struggle for, they think it's about money and sales. That's not what they struggle for. What they struggle for is a story that they can make compelling and believable. Because the very first thing that anybody buys from you is not your product.
Yes.
It's the story.
Yes.
Unless they buy into the story, they can't buy anything else. So the frameworks that we're trying to install is to put into place this ability to create this rousing, compelling story that people can rally around and then build companies on. And of course, there's a lot of other things that go on, but we have to get to that initial part first. And money, investment-wise, will not come until you have that compelling story first, and the resulting key messages and the value propositions that translate into products.
I love it. I agree with you that reflecting on it. And by the way, if you're listening and tuning in right now, check it out. The framework is on the website that Kurian mentioned. And Kurian, after we're done with the broadcast, you can put the link in there.
Yeah, I'll give you all the show notes.
Awesome. And I would say, as you speak, because some of our listeners may not be the owners and entrepreneurs, and they say, well, how does it relate to me? And I say, how it relates to you, you're going to have to craft the right stories. If you are in a job and you want to get to the next promotion, you're going to have to start telling the right stories to yourself and to your to your management, to people that are leading, to your leaders. You need to take that opportunity, and if you're looking for a job, the interview would require the stories. That would require you to share your success stories, and also your story of where you're seeing yourself going and growing and how you're going to contribute to the company. If you're looking to inspire and improve your relationship at home with your children, you need stories. You need compelling stories of why you need to be together and achieving to what you want to grow together, growing together, and improving on your quality of relationship, on quality of your life, your finances, whatever is that your goal is. I feel in what you shared, Kurian, it's in any areas it can be applicable, because as you mentioned in the beginning, the stories is that what move us. The stories, the right stories, the compelling stories that we repeat. And when we memorize them, when we are touched by them, when we're emotionally invested in them, then we would be lifelong, cheerleaders of those people that we admire. So that's a responsibility. And one of the ways to do that is to get Kurian in touch with Kurian, get his framework, and reach out to him if you need, if you need support further. That is fantastic. That is fantastic. And Kurian, as we close in, maybe some final words of wisdom or insights that you want to share with us.
The first thing, the absolute very first thing that anybody buys from you or your company is your story. That's it. So the only thing you sell is your story. If the story doesn't sell, the products and services that you provide have no place in that customer, in that employees, in your people's heads. It has no place. So if you're going to do anything, you have to make your story so compelling and believable and so potent that it will transform your prospect, at least in imagination first, from where they are today to where they want to be. And so we're all in the transformation business. The most potent tool for the transformation of your prospects, of your employees, of your people is stories. So make them as beautiful and as vibrant and as potent as possible.
I love this. Thank you so much, Kurian, for coming in today, sharing your wisdom with us, sharing your framework, your book. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Jonna, thanks for having me on your show.
My pleasure. Wow. This was good conversation, very insightful, a lot of details. I love how Kurian pulled us kind of up high in the strategy. I know no doubt why he called his company strategic, because he is very up high person, very strategic observation, and I try to pull a little bit of a tactical insights from him. I hope that you have enjoyed that. And if you do need support, maybe you are the person that we are just too much into our grasp level. We're too much into day to day, too much trying to survive and get through things. And we need a person like Kurian to pull us up high, to get us that bird's eye view and to say, look at what is possible. Look at how your story can affect your future, can affect your relationship, can affect the opportunities that may knock on your door. So reach out to him for further conversation on that. And I am very grateful that you've listened in today, that you've joined us today. I'm looking forward to the next conversation with you next week. Until then, I wish you well and keep powering unique you, my friend. Bye.